Okay. Hey everyone, this is your favorite friend Jay or Jaylan Salah, as you formerly know her, film critic at Geek Vibes Nation and In Session Film. I have the pleasure of interviewing director Elizabeth I of New Wave, a documentary about the Eurodance music of the 80s, known by Vietnamese Americans at the time as New Wave genre. But this documentary is more than a music documentary, although it excels at that. It's also about undiagnosed PTSD, generational trauma, refugees, finding your place in the world and identity versus what the world wants you to be. So I just want to welcome Rachel and Elizabeth to this chat. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're so happy to be with you.
Okay, so first of all, Elizabeth, digging deep into the family locket box, going into the roots and trying to find like what is what is my family history about, what were my parents, my grandparents, what were the people in my family interested in, and then coming up with something as universal as music. How did you tackle this project and what brought you to it?
Um, well, it started when I was pregnant with my daughter in 2018, and that was really the genesis of the project. I was like, I've been producing projects for more than a dozen years and helped a lot of filmmakers tell their stories, and I've always felt like, you know, aligned with the various stories that I've helped realize, but I'd never I had never shared a story about the Vietnamese American experience. And everything that I knew growing up was always, um, I always learned through American media. So it was films by white men that were incredibly violent and toxic. And, the Vietnamese were always villains in these films by, I'll name some of them, the Platoons, Apocalypse Now, Full Metal Jacket, etc. They're like so violent and so awful, and you carry around so much shame your whole life. And on top of that, because there was so much shame from losing your country and fleeing to this new country that, America, that doesn't even want you there, you kind of hold on shame after shame after shame, and it's like piled on. So I think in this kind of moment, I was really like a reckoning for me when I was pregnant with her, to say like, wow, this is the work that I do. What kind of stories will I leave behind for her? So I went to the closest piece to a real family history book for me, and those are family photo albums. And the pictures that popped out at me while I was going through that was really of my uncles and aunties, because they had these striking outfits and, you know, hair, makeup, etc. And that really was the entry point for me to say, hey, I think I can make a story of this, about this new wave movement this new wave music that they love so much. And obviously it wasn't just them, it was so much more our community. So it was a lot of research. It was a huge team effort. Rachel being here from, the very first interview we had with Ian to, the 6-year journey that we've been on.
Okay, so Rachel, whenever I see like a female producer backing up a female led or directed project, I feel deep down like I'm happy. Like us women, we're supposed to stand up by each other, like kind of like hold each other up. So what brought you to this project with Elizabeth? And you were there from day one. Like, why did you feel like this is a project I need to back up? I need to be a producer on. What draws you to this particular project?
Well, Elizabeth and I had worked together before. We had worked, on another film and some other commercial projects. But as soon as she told me about the project, I was immediately intrigued, just because I'd never really heard anything about this music before. I was familiar with UK new wave music, but the specific Euro disco genre, I'd really never heard anything about. And so it was kind of just like this brand new world where I could really dive in and learn everything from starting at zero. And so that was a joy for me, but also, of course, Elizabeth as my friend, like I did want to support her and lift her up, because this story that she's telling is truly groundbreaking. It's really the first time that we're ever seeing a story told in the media from this Vietnamese American woman perspective. It's so rare that we have the chance to hear stories like this. So I just felt like it was, historical, and I really just wanted to be a part of this process to, come out with something new. Like she mentioned, we've already seen all of the white male POV stories, and I felt like, this was the first time that we were hearing something new.
Okay, so this is
Oh,
please tell me, yes.
oh no, I was just gonna add too, even with like the white male POV, even with the male POV, there's been non-white um men outside of the community that have told this film, and in our communities that have told, not this film, but these stories, and they always end up back in, this toxic male POV. So I think that in finding that feminine voice, the maternal threads, the mother wounds that we all carry, you're like, that was really important to center because those aren't the stories that get shared, you know?
Definitely. What I loved about the movie is that it's a very cool movie. Like the moment I just finished watching it, I immediately went up and danced, started looking up all the songs. So I want to ask you, like, how did you compile a great playlist so that it takes us like a trip down memory lane, but at the same time, it's also very energizing and it's very beautiful. Like you could watch this movie and feel very touched, but at the same time, it's also a cool movie because it introduces us to music, which is a universal language, something that we all love, but also discover new artists. So how did you come up with this playlist? And what cassettes did you listen to, vinyl records, whatever? How did you come up with it? It was just impressive for me and very dancing.
Well, I went to the original artists first. I think it was like the Vietnamese diaspora artists that were covering the songs. I went to them first, and that was kind of my education, was like, oh, what were they covering? Why were they covering this music? And why wasn't it the new wave that kind of I guess new wave music isn't mainstream, but the the new wave music that people know more about, which is the British new wave music. And I'm like, why did they cover the Italians, the Germans, the Austrians, the Dutch? Like they were all the like not the main British new wave artists like Depeche Mode and Pet Shop Boys, etc. They were covering all these other ones. I was like, they were covering like the deeper cuts in this genre. So I went there, and the Vietnamese artists, they covered these specific artists. So from going there, I went to the original Eurodisco artists, the people who were the writers and the performers of that era, and really it ended up being like a couple of hundred of tracks. And I didn't do it alone. I think kind of the first piece of research was I amassed all of these tracks, but they were just on these large playlists and kind of like spreadsheets. But Rachel was such a huge part of this. I guess we would say we're both music supervisors in this film because we couldn't afford to pay music supervisors. So I want Rachel to kind of speak more to the crazy process of elimination and also
Yeah.
listening a lot to like select.
Yeah, for
You're-
me, I felt like, I just kind of went down the rabbit hole of just going to YouTube and finding, these specific German and Italian playlists and just kind of listening like song by song by song and trying
Wow.
to find something that would fit each moment. But yeah, like I mentioned, I started from zero, so it was really cool to just kind of learn about a totally new genre.
Okay, so okay, you interviewed, like Linda Trang Dai, okay, and this is something huge because she's like the Vietnamese Madonna, and this is someone you saw your relatives, your peers, even teens at the time going crazy over, and now you're interviewing her as a legend. So how did it feel, like talking to a living legend? It's like seriously seeing her with her hair and her style, and now you're talking to her and she's really human and she's very vulnerable even in front of the camera. So how was the process of approaching her?
Wow. It was just really difficult. It was very challenging, as you can imagine. I think like with anybody, right? It can be an everyday person on the street that you've never heard of, or somebody who's a local celebrity, a diaspora celebrity. And um, I think she's a very busy person and she's very guarded for good reason. She's been she's been pummeled in the press by just the local Vietnamese press as well, just for, dressing sexy, breaking cultural conventions and traditions by but just being who she is. So it took a lot of time. It really took years to kind of get her to open up. We had our first interview with her in 2019, but I'd say it took until the summer of 2022 before she really kind of opened up. And that was a lot of work with talking things through with Rachel, re-listening to interviews, pinpointing points in her history where we're like, we need to ask her more about that, meeting her super fans and her super fans advising us on like, these things are really, what are some soft spots for Linda? What is important to her? And, learning about her family, learning about her son, and being able to know that there are huge milestones in her life and her son's life, like the graduation, and just being there at these important moments in her life. So I think, yeah, after 2020, 21, 22, after 3 years and change, we were able to really kind of make some breakthroughs with Linda.
So, okay, I want to ask you both as a final question, like, what was a very important scene for you to see and to shoot and to just watch behind the monitor? Like a scene that you felt you gave it all, or an interview that kind of touched you, a scene that maybe Rachel watched and felt like she didn't expect it to come out that intense, that emotional. I want to ask Elizabeth and I want to ask Rachel. So,
I'll let Rachel start.
That's a good question. Probably one of the first interviews we had with Ian was especially emotional and touching for me, just because, I had never heard firsthand from someone what it was like to go through the experience of fleeing Vietnam as a refugee and then coming here as a teenager, and just all of the, you know, struggles that he had personally with his father, and to know that his father, passed away shortly after they were able to reconnect. So, I felt like that really touched me, and it just really humanized a historical event that I've maybe like read about in books, but have never really had the chance to like interview or talk with anyone closely about what had happened. So I would say that probably stuck out the most to me.
okay, and Elizabeth.
And I wanted just to ask, is this going in print? Like this interview?
It will be like a video interview on the Geek Vibes Nation YouTube channel.
Oh,
We have YouTube
we're
channel.
actually going to see this?
Yeah, are you guys not like, if you're not comfortable, please tell
Oh, this
me.
is going on the channel?
Well,
Oh,
usually all our interviews are on
No,
the
Can you
channel.
edit it?
will you edit it?
Well, we have like an
Do
amazing
they end up being
editor.
edited?
Yeah, definitely. We edit everything. Don't worry. Like,
Because I wanted to ask you, I was like, oh, if I say something, it might be a spoiler.
okay, well,
After I was like, oh, spoiler
usually
alert.
it usually gets
I guess
like,
we're talking it out. I hopefully the editor will do a good job.
definitely, and it's like published later on when the embargo is lifted, like when they're telling us like, guys, embargo is lifted. Hello, just publish it. But of course, if you like want me to
Oh,
eliminate
I
anything, edit anything out, please tell me, because yeah, we publish everything on video.
Yeah, this part right now.
no. It's okay. I think I'm like, if people watch it, great. I guess I just wanted to say, like, for me, being in the film, like that scene when I'm finally in the film and I make a phone call to someone in my life, or the phone call or is returned to me. Um, it was pretty shocking because I didn't anticipate how quickly things would move. I was just kind of like, I haven't spoken to them in a long time. And the fact that it moved in the way that it did, I think I just was in shock, but it became such a pivotal moment because there wasn't very much filming around any of it. It was just a lot of conversations with Rachel and a couple of my editors, like, how do I do this? How do I say something about this? I'm not really sure. I would write a sentence, a day, a sentence every other day. It was really hard for me to express my emotions around this, like, history I tried to bury, right? I was just like, I don't want to talk about my past. It was just hard enough not to be raised by my parents, but to like revisit it and like talk about how I feel was a lot. So after we had those conversations, I was like, okay, I'm ready. I have the courage. I'm gonna do this. And then it just happened. Like, so anyways, that for me, I think for the rest of my life, I am indebted to these incredible storytellers who are my partners and collaborators in this journey, this storytelling journey. And that is the scene for me, that scene when it actually happens, that the phone call is made, and there's a huge decision, right? Whether or not to continue on that path or just to stop. So I feel like that was a huge moment where other people that have watched it have always said, like, I didn't know if that was the end or if that was the beginning. Like, are you going to continue to pursue? But most people say, I think it just felt like you were going to stop.
Lovely. Okay, thank you so much, Rachel and Elizabeth. This was so much fun and really, really emotionally ravishing for me. I love talking to you. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you so much.